The last one that I want to ask you about, and I'm not sure if you've been able to attend any of the practices. I know some of them were semi-open, semi-not, but I'm sure you, like me and plenty of others, have heard some of the news out of practice. Have you heard like one or two guys that are the surprises out of practice, and maybe people need to look out for coming into next season?
Well, I'm not sure if he qualifies as a surprise as a former five-star prospect and then the transfer. But I think that people are really sleeping on what Jalil Bethea will be doing and what kind of role he'll be playing and how impactful he's going to be. I'm really excited to see what he will do. We made such a big deal last year about Aiden Holloway transferring after a kind of a lackluster freshman season, up and down freshman season at Auburn. Miami, they had their coach leave in the middle of the year, fed up with NIL, and basically their whole season went into the tank. I think that it was kind of let's more or less a selfish season for all the Miami players once the coach left. I think it all imploded, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he will do in a system, in the Nate Oates system, and in a program that will hold him a little bit accountable, but really demand a lot from him.
Yeah, and that's kind of my thoughts around Bethea. That's the Aiden Holloway connection is the connection that I think most people have made, and for good reason, right? When you look at the type of system that Aiden Holloway, what he looked like in Nate Oates' system compared to what he looked like in a set shot system with Bruce Pearl, just was a different skill set. The fact that you see Jalil Bethea, statistically, this is one that, shocks people, is the worst shooting guard that we have coming onto this team. And if you think about the reason he had the 5-star rating, like he was a better shooter than Con Knipple. He was a better shooter than plenty of guys that are about to get drafted here coming up very, very soon. And it was because of what he did, obviously in the AAU circuit. And so I agree. I think he's a guy. The other guy, and I mentioned it, and I just want to say it again because I've seen, even since I've posted my last video, more and more people, Keaton Bristow is a name that if you do not know it, you need to go ahead and find out about it. Because he was a name that nobody really thought about moving from Tarleton State. Like, who is this kid? Yeah, he won Freshman of the Year in the WAC, but who is he? He is a name that if you have not heard it, listen here now. Go ahead and look him up. His defense is like, every time I ask people that have either been to practice or, read message boards or anything of people that have been there, he's the name that keeps coming back up. Obviously Bethea, right? But as you said, I think he's under the radar for people that haven't paid attention because you just see the poor shooting numbers and you're like, this guy's not that good, right? You have to give somebody also some slack, like you said, when their coach leaves.
Well, that and you go, take it back to the last question with Clemson. All these names that you're throwing out, all these transfers and the freshmen they brought in are not really that highly thought. I mean, they're respected, but they're not really like, oh, that guy's going to be an NBA player per se. I think once they come and the chemistry all together, obviously the expectations last year were national championship or bust, and you've had really, really high expectations over the last couple of years. I'm of the opinion that ESPN and the powers that be are kind of underrating Alabama, but all the pieces, the parts are better, put all the parts together. I think the sum of the parts is going to be really, really good next year and surprise a lot of teams. And Bristow is definitely going to be a part of that. I'm looking forward to seeing how Coach Oates takes every piece and then, just add LeBaron Philon back on top of that, takes every piece and turns it into a real team. I think that there's going to be, you walk into the year thinking 4th, 5th, 6th in the SEC, maybe just on paper, not knowing all the question marks. But as you work through the non-conference schedule and really get to, through the SEC schedule, I think you're going to see a team that, this team is really, really competitive night in, night out, just like Nate Oates has always been and is going to be poised for a deep tournament run.
Yeah, and I think the thing with, like you were saying, underrated, I think – LeBaron Philon changed some of that, right? There was a lot of people pre-LeBaron Philon, right? Like, I think even if you add a guy like Desmond Claude, right? Highly rated guy, but because he was an unknown commodity in our system, at least, I don't think that the expectations of this team would have rebounded as well as they did. I think that the people that rebounded their expectations on Alabama were people that, you got LeBaron Philon back and they're like, okay, I'm willing to, give Nate Oates some grace. Like, he's not finished lower than this amount. Like, we've just got to give him like kind of the Nate Oates bump of he's going to do at least this well because he's proven it time in and time out. That's one that I'm very curious about. I think that the underrated teams, when we talked about the team going in, that made the Final Four, that was a team that, didn't have the same expectations that last year's team did, right? It was a 4 seed. It wasn't the 1 seed. It wasn't the 2 seed. There is something to say that when Nate Oates has a little bit worse expectations, he's going to ask the sports reporters to put him at 5th again. That's the old adage of the couple of times they've finished 5th, they've, Elite 8, Final Four. And that's just something that has not been the case, historically. So I am very curious to see how that's going to be. Like I said, don't want to have this all be about basketball, but did want to, start at the top with a couple of things, like I said, I mentioned in the last episode.
I'll just let you know that when I do get the voting ballot, I don't care what it is. I'm putting Alabama 5th just for that factor.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm sure Nate Oates is definitely going to make a comment about it. I thought that it's been pretty funny. He even made the comment last year of like, hey, can I get you guys to vote us 5th? Like, we may be too highly talented for that, but like, can you vote us 5th? I think this year, if I was to guess, who's going to be, preseason ranked, Florida, Kentucky. The question then becomes, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Arkansas, right? Those are kind of the school, Ole Miss, right? Those are some of the schools that are in that next tier of, who's going to be ranked higher than who. We'll see. I think that there's definitely a lot of questions to be answered. Could we be 5th preseason? Sure. My thoughts closer in that 3rd to 4th range. If I was to, harness a guess, obviously my expectations remain the same. You got to finish in the double bye. That my expectation is double bye in the SEC tournament and second weekend in March Madness. Like, that's your expectations coming into any season, because that's what you've raised the floor to, right? The floor needs to be double bye second weekend, because if you can't do that, then you've caused some problem, whether it comes to NIL, whether it comes to like, what have you done? And I think that in general, he's done a good job managing it. You're going to see this year, however, for anybody that followed it pretty closely, Nate didn't want to pay for a couple of players early on. And so they missed out on some guys that they potentially could have gotten had they been willing to pony up some extra cash. Now, it may have worked out for us. We may have finished with the roster that's going to be okay, but only time will tell if that's going to be a problem. You're missing out on Adrian Woolley or Jerron Pierre, or are those names going to come back to bite us? We'll see, right? We don't know the answer to that question, and I don't think anybody does.
No, I'm with you. I would almost, at this point, 7 years in, 6 going into 7th year, 7 years in, it's kind of Nate Oates I trust. And you'd almost, in my opinion, this is just Joe, but I would rather save that money for people returning the following years, that sort of thing, reward developing in your program. And I think that you passed on guys, and maybe that played into a factor of helping getting LeBaron Philon back. And if that was the trade-off, to me, that's a win.
Correct. I think that passing on guys helps you get LeBaron back. I think also passing on certain guys is the reason why you potentially get like a guy like Bristow, right? If a Mohamed Diabate comes back, and obviously I'm not going to just single him out, but if a guy like Mo D comes back, does Bristow potentially come in? Yeah, maybe not. Maybe you don't go after a guy like that. And from what I'm hearing, his potential, he's one of the guys, honestly, similar to Philon, that once he gets the chance, he's the name that you're hearing, right? And that Philon was that guy last year. Yeah. And the reason I keep mentioning Bristow is, for anybody that was in the loop, Philon was the name we heard last year of he might redshirt, and then you hear Philon coming into the summer of like, no, this guy's going to play. Yeah. This guy might start. Like, he's causing Mark all kinds of problems. So